Okay, thank you very much. And just to say thanks to ASEN for inviting me. It's always a privilege to participate in anything that ASEN does. I mean, not least because nationalism seems to feature in everything we do, particularly in academia, within the social sciences. And also because if we think about the theme for today, which is nation building in the 21st century, reflections on the impact of migration, multinationalism, and multiculturalism, Ghana is a very good example of that, and we're probably going to get to grips with more of that this evening. So congratulations for braving the weather. I've still got some patches of snow up in my back garden, but never mind, that's okay. So I thought actually that to ease myself into the discussion for today, I'll sort of begin with a few examples of nation states around the world, because we're told there are about over 200 countries in the whole world. I think 224 might be a closer figure to that. And just a handful are nation states. So perhaps if I sort of maybe give some examples of, if we look at Asia, we've got Poland, which has got 96.7% ethnic Poles, 97.8% speak Polish at home. Hungary's got about 95% ethnic Hungarians or Magyars. Albania has 98.6% ethnic Albanians. Armenia, 98% ethnic Armenians, plus others. And Bangladesh has 98% ethnic Bengali. So it's really very difficult to get 100%. I mean, so far I think Egypt is 99% Arabs. So it's always very difficult to have, it is impossible really to have 100%, but there are a few in the 90s around. So these are very good examples of nation states, i.e. when Gelner 1983 says where the political and natural units are congruent. Or are the same, or coincide, nation states. If we go to Europe, we've got, and I sort of chose my words very carefully here, because you've got Portugal with all these Iberians, Celts, Greeks, Phoenicians, Romans, Jews, Suebi, Visigoths, Muslim, Berbers, and Arabs. And this is an amalgam, but I've sort of chosen my words, homogeneous amalgam, because over the years, these have all resided in one place, and it's now Portugal, or they're all Portuguese. So you can say heterogeneity has changed into homogeneity at this stage in Portugal. If we look at England, we've got another homogeneous amalgam of heterogeneous Germanic tribes, including Angles, Saxon, Frisian, and Jutes. And then if we look at Iceland, we've got previously Norwegian and Celtic heritage, but now are 99% homogeneous with an identifiable single language, which is Icelandic. Fortunately or unfortunately for them, they are too far away, so they haven't got too many immigration problems with people trying to sneak in. You'd have to brave the snow to get there. So these are also examples of nation states, but these are cases where they began with heterogeneous groups, lots of them, and over a long period of time, homogeneity has assumed. So that's one set of, different from what the other slide we looked at. If we look at Africa, we've got Egypt, as I said, 99%. The dates in brackets are when the countries got independent. So the Lesotho's got 99.7% ethnic Basotho, or they're all Bantus basically. And you'd probably be interested to know that Lesotho is actually a landlocked enclave sitting inside South Africa territory. Swaziland is 98% ethnic Swazis. Botswana is 79% ethnic Tswana, and Ghana is 79% of Guan ancestry. And I'll sort of get more into that sometime this evening. And as I'm sure you know, West Africa is boiling at the moment with Côte d'Ivoire, and Guinea has just died out a little bit, but I can guarantee within the next 25 months, where we might see a few things happening there again. If we look at South-West Africa, I've put that in red because it's kind of, we've got Ivory Coast, which roughly 75% Akan, And then there's 20% that we can categorize as mostly ethnic Wataras, plus some Guineans and Malians. And then you've got some 5% non-Africans. But glossing over this, there is a kind of a divide of northern Muslims and the south. Well, the reportage usually would say Christian, but I usually would say non-Islamic, because you know that the Muslim will wash his feet at least once a day and go to the mosque, but we cannot guarantee that this other half, at the very best, someone might go to a funeral every 3 years and a wedding every 4 years, and that's probably about the only time they step in church. So just because they're not Muslim doesn't make them Christian. So I prefer to use non-Islamic than Christian South. So that's what we've got for Ivory Coast at the moment, or Côte d'Ivoire. And Guinea is about 40% Fulani, 30% Mandinka, 20% Sosi, and another combination of 10% Bele, Kisi, and non-Africans made up of French, Lebanese, etc. Some of you may be aware that Guinea had elections recently. At the first round, there was no outright winner, so he went to the second round, and at the second round, Alpha Condé got 52.50% of the votes, and the rest was, well, Diallo got the rest. So you can see a clear ethnic divide among the two candidates who picked up the rest from the others. So this is another example of a multinational state where you've got multiple national identities within a single state jurisdiction, which theoretically is different from the examples of Portugal, England, and Iceland, where heterogeneity has assumed homogeneity, which is also different from the other set, Egypt, Lesotho, Swaziland, and the others, which are sort of getting to the 100%. So these are examples of, states, nation states, or those trying to get there somehow. I thought I'll sort of ease that into the discussion as we go along. Well, now let's kind of drill down to Ghana. Here we've got, as I said, 79% of wider Guan ancestry, of which, that's the breakdown, 45.3% Akan, and then 4% Guan. Well, the reason that is this 4% are the only tribe in Ghana that actually, they are more like a remnant, small group of people who say they are Guan and speak the Guan dialect. Although, of course, all those who can trace their background to the old Ghana Empire are also of Guan ancestry. So that's why I've got the wider Guan ancestry, 79%, of which 45.3% is Akan, the Guan 4%, Gadangbe 7.3%, Modi Dagbani 15.2%, Gurma 3.6%, Gurusi 2.6%, Mandibuzanga 1%. And then you've got others who are about 11.7%. And these would have relatives in Togo or Benin. The other belt stretches from eastern Ghana and cuts across 4 countries: eastern Ghana, Togo, Benin, and western Nigeria. And I have to say, this 11% would have parents or cousins or uncles or nieces, whatever, in Togo, Benin, or Nigeria. That's the other belt. And then other tribes, Paul Nugent calls them CTMs, or Central Togo minorities, kind of 1.4%. And then lots of foreigners, making up about 7.8%. And that brings it to a total of 99.999999%. So that's Ghana for you as we speak. It is very multi-ethnic or multinational in a single state jurisdiction. But the 79% can trace their background to the old Ghana Empire. Well, just kind of, in the pictorial sense, the old Ghana Empire was basically located somewhere somewhere between the cities of Djenné and Timbuktu in Mali, present-day Mali. That's where the old Ghana Empire was located. And I mean, there's another map which some of you may be familiar with. That's Mali there, that's Timbuktu, and Ghana comes down in the south. So the migration routes, along the Niger Bend will sort of, take you somewhere. I mean, lots of groups had their own migration routes. You've also got another map. So you can see the Niger Bend, that's the blue, that's the Niger Bend, and you've got Timbuktu sitting like at the apex of it, around where the old Ghana Empire was. And to be more precise, you've got the area between Jenny and Timbuktu kind of dotted. So that's kind of precisely where in present-day Mali, the old Ghana Empire was geographically located. So sometime around 1067, the Almoravids were Muslims, and they raided the place, and because these people didn't want to be Muslims, they ran away. And so the migration took place, and they took several routes and ended up somewhere in southwards towards Ghana. So that's modern Ghana south of the Niger Bend, if that kind of helps pictorially give you some idea of what has happened. So as we speak, Ghana is like this: 10 administrative regions. This is the way Ghana looks like at the moment. So that's just in the pictorial sense. And what happens is, yeah, as I've explained, you know, that there's all this going on with, you know, this is the way it is. 79% can trace or can be traced directly to the old Ghana Empire. And I have to say that this is not some sort of political fantasy or some sort of idea which someone just made the up. There are at the very least 30 academic publications. We're talking about serious academic publications, articles in serious anthropological and historical journals, PhD monographs published over the years, all the way from 1651 coming down. So that's list 1 to 15 of academic publications on this very subject. You can get it from me later, but just so you know that this is of really strong academic heritage that this conclusion has been arrived at. That is list 16 to 30. So I can list at least 30. Someone may be able to list more than that. I don't know. I'm just sort of at the bottom there. I'm probably one of the last to make a contribution to the subject. And there are two brief points that I would like to make, which are that Eva Meyer-Rowitz was an anthropologist in the 1940s. She interviewed and published in 1990 the results that she conducted in the chief's palaces of the 79% I've talked about, or the royal households. The only contribution I make to the whole subject is that since, for the past 50 years, what I've done since Eva Meyer-Rowitz is that I had to review all the scattered evidence of, at the very least, the 30 authorships which we looked at, and piece together the whole jigsaw, and that seemed to confer with what Meyer-Rowitz found out, that they can be traced to the old Ghana Empire. But the evidence is very scattered. I mean, you've got at least 30 writers contributing their bits here and there. So what I did in 2007 was to publish my book, so that to piece together the jigsaw. And as I said, that brings us to this point. This is the way Ghana looks like. And the problem, well, the scenario in Africa at the moment is, as some of you may know, because of the partition of Africa, lots of multiple national identity groups were bunched together within demarcated territory. So you may find, you know, you're put together in the demarcated territory, and that becomes the new state. And the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, decided that these boundaries should become sacrosanct. And so that is the way it became. And we find in Africa, actually, that there are lots of ethnic hostilities or multinational hostilities within single-state jurisdictions, to the point that even when electoral results clearly show that you've lost, they will not accept it, and there will be a fight. We've seen it happen in Zimbabwe, we've seen it happen in Kenya, we've seen it happen in Guinea. As we speak, it's happening in the Ivory Coast. And one of the reasons I believe I was asked to speak on this subject is that although Ghana looks like this, as you can see, Ghana has been very peaceful, in contrast with all, at least the 4 other examples I've mentioned. And I'm going to take time to explain why Ghana's case is like that, despite the fact that there's this ethnic breakdown, but it's not a hostile country and they live in peace, as against maybe Zimbabwe or Kenya or Nigeria or Cote d'Ivoire or Guinea for that matter. And I'm going to be talking about 7 main points that contribute to why Ghana lives in peace, although there are lots of ethnic groupings there. The first point is the role of Kwame Nkrumah. He was the first prime minister and the first president of the country. And in 1957, when Ghana became independent, Nkrumah, the colony was called Gold Coast, and Nkrumah decided that it should be called Ghana. And this was based on his own personal conviction from his own academic research on the subject. The outline of Nkrumah's MPhil thesis used to be on the University of Pennsylvania website, but I think that's been taken off now. But just in case some of you may have encountered it was actually in the public domain until after a while the University of Pennsylvania took it off. But if you ever saw the outline of Nkrumah's MPhil thesis, you would know that the agenda he had was more or less a research into the ethnogeographic origins of modern Ghana. So he himself had encountered some serious academic work in the field. But the real person who had done lots of the work is J.B. Dankwa. He started from the 1920s, doing lots of research on it. Between 1920s and 1950s, he encountered lots of academic opposition on the subject, rigorous academic opposition, and debated his way through all that. But at the time when Nkrumah was president, that he named it Ghana, Dankwa was the opposition leader. So these two were not friends. And if you know a bit about Ghana, these two never agreed on anything. They were stark enemies. So for these two to agree that it should be called Ghana just goes to show that the substance of the decision they took, that it wasn't just some sort of political fight, but at least enemies agreed that it can be called Ghana. And the independence movement and the just cause of anti-colonialism sort of brought a kind of a charismatic wave then, which really buoyed Nkrumah's charisma. And I have to say that he was also a little dictatorial, but at the time he was more or less seen as a savior. So the whole wave of nationalism kind of overlooked some of his dictatorial tendencies. So he got away with some things. Also, I think the other point I want to make is that despite all that, Nkrumah's charisma and the wave of the independence nationalism are not the only factors that have bound the Ghanaian groups together. Because if that were the case, hostilities and disintegration should have taken place when Nkrumah was overthrown. But instead, coherence and cohesion has matured since then. So we know that it wasn't just because of Nkrumah's bully tactics, but that there's something more underpinning the whole thing. And I'm going to sort of come to that. As I said, Eva Meyerowitz separately interviewed the royal households or the chief's palaces of these 79%. So we're talking maybe ethno-national identity groups of maybe at least 7 or 8 separately at different times. And each time, the linguist or the fetish priest or the chief linguist, the custodian of the oral tradition, after they have recounted their story of where they came from, the migration route, and why they are where they are now, concludes, we've come from the old Ghana Empire, separately from all the others who didn't know whether Meyerowitz had gone to interview this bunch or that bunch. Separately, they came to that. So the custodians of the oral tradition have that. And they also have the responsibility to sanction wars and hostilities between other groups. So, for example, before any war can take place, it has to be sanctioned by the chief, whose warriors will lead the whole battle, and things like that. But the war wasn't common between them because somehow they knew they'd all come from the same place. I mean, at some point in the geographical politique, when the colonialists had arrived and trade began, I mean, there were a few battles to sort of gain ground and gain, sort of conjure trade routes or take positions about trade routes. But apart from that, it wasn't really the norm for them to be fighting each other, because they kind of knew from the oral tradition that we'd all come from the same place. And particularly after independence, apart from the oral tradition, after independence, we now have a new state. And each one has to abide by the laws of the new state. So even if you thought that we came from the same place, or even if you didn't care, you can't take up arms and come and fight me, because if you did that, you'll be persecuted. I mean, we know that in other examples in Africa, they don't care, and this does happen. But at least this is a scenario. Apart from the psychological factor, there was a new state, a single state jurisdiction over multiple national identities. So that's that. And I mean, to date, we've got some, tribal hostilities happening. We've got the Dagbon crisis, which has been raging for a long time. But that is an internal feud. It's not one tribe against the other. It's an internal feud between the sort of ancestral lines that have to access the throne from a certain period of time to a certain period. So that's an internal feud. There is also the Bimbela chieftaincy dispute between the Nanumbers and the Konkombas that has been going on for many years. That is also a feud in between two clans. So more or less, there hasn't been really hostilities between, the tribes that have come from the same old Ghana Empire, if I should put it that way. And in view of the traditions of origin and a single state jurisdiction over these multiple ethno-national identities, none of the two cases listed above, I mean that what's in brown, or any others listed elsewhere, have potential to lead to a separatist or secessionist movement. I mean, there's no cause for alarm. None of these want to get out or break away or go and fight somebody else. So all these things contribute to how separate groups in Ghana can live in peace without causing too much trouble. And as I said, apart from Mayor Rowett's evidence, a separate review of all these various authorships put together the jigsaw puzzle. So that's point number 2 of why Ghana is the way it is, in sharp contradistinction to Kenya or Zimbabwe or Nigeria or Guinea or Cote d'Ivoire for that matter. Point number 3 is about balancing the ethnic arithmetic. Ghana seems to be fine, but there's a lot of hard work that has gone on in the past. Each head of state really endeavored to strike a balance of ethnic representation in their cabinet. And in addition to that, there was this strategic regional appointee. So for example, they always made sure that an Ewe was a Secretary of State or the regional commissioner for the Ewe Volta region. A Fanti would go to the central region, an Ashanti for the Ashanti region, and for the 3 northern regions, at least, whoever was the Secretary of State for them would come from the area. So even apart from the peaceful base, there's a lot of hard work to make sure that the ethnic arithmetic always balances itself. They try not to stoke any fires, more or less. 1 or 2 regimes were not too brilliant at this. I mean, we know that the Buzia regime of 1972 wasn't too good at this. And we know that the Rawlings era, there is a popular perception that in the Rawlings era, he packed his administration with lots of Ewes, because he thought that the Buzia regime also discriminated against Ewes. So these 2 regimes were not too brilliant at the ethnic arithmetic. But General Kutua Champon, who actually he came by a coup d'etat, was a military ruler. He mastered the art of the ethnic arithmetic. And to be honest with you, among all the heads of state in Ghana, he's been the best at promoting national unity. He instituted the National Charter, which had the mantra, one nation, one people, one destiny. And in his time, he also instituted a national pledge. And to date, school children have to sing that every morning. They sing the national pledge every morning. And subsequent heads of state have sort of kept, to the ethnic balancing script. So there's been quite a lot of hard work, about trying to keep the nation united, more or less. And this ethnic balancing trend has remained, even with, I mean, you would have thought that perhaps maybe the military governments were trying hard to forge national unity, but even the elected civilian governments from the Fourth Republic from 1992 up to now are still balancing the ethnic arithmetic. So that's point number 3. Point number 4 is to do with a sociocultural evolution. Quite apart from, the multiple groups that exist, because of the education system and because of Christianity and other bonds of social networks, there are intermarriages. So, 50 years ago is different from now. I mean, there's been lots of intermarriages and, a huge sociocultural evolution taking place. The education, I mean, unlike other places where, schools are kind of tailor-made for people in certain areas or people of certain class or identity groups, the Ghanaian education system is very open. Once from age 10, you can do your common entrance examination and gain access to any secondary school of your choice, regardless of your class or ethnic background. You can basically, from any part of the country, attend school in any part of the country as you wish. And this is a very good chance to mix and grow up together with others from any other identity group. And by doing so, these adolescent bonds tend to supersede any kind of ethnic polarizations, more or less. So there's a sociocultural evolution that's going on. And these adolescent bonds, in addition to other bonds through church social networks, have led to and continue to lead to intermarriages among different identity groups. So this is also another way of ensuring that there is sort of interactions, long-lasting interactions that will basically stop any ethnic polarizations. The 5th point is also that, in addition to all this, lots of sacrifices have been made. I mean, at some stage, something has to give. But as I said, Ghana has experienced many military governments along the way. But in 1992, for example, Flight Lieutenant Rawlings agreed to conduct elections and ushered in the Fourth Republic. He won the election, but in 2000, his party lost, and he handed over. He wasn't like Mugabe, who ended up with a power sharing agreement, or Kenya ended up with power sharing. He handed over, basically. And because of what he did, that sacrifice that he made, in 2008, the opposition came in, and the opposition also were there for 2 terms, 4 years. And in 2008, the opposition lost by just 0.46%, right? Yeah. And they handed over. You've got places where there are wide margins. He loses by 4%, and he still wants to stay in. These people lost by 0.46%, and they still handed over. So there have been quite some huge sacrifices that have been paid along the line. And that has also contributed to why Ghana is multinational, but is able to have good governance and be in peace. Point number 6, and I mean, I've kind of thought about all this, and I just don't know what to put it down to, other than maybe just a Ghanaian temperament to sort of prefer to set aside hostilities and forge ahead with priorities, maybe, because I don't know the rocket science to it, really. So point number 6 is the political evolution of all this has made it now we've got 2 main parties. One kind of more socialistic and the other more sort of capitalist. And the NDC, or the National Democratic Congress, that's the party that was founded by Rawlings. They were there from 92 to 96 and 96 2000 and had to hand over, and then came back in 2008, and they are currently in government. They are quite a good amalgam of all ethnic groups. The other opposition party, that's the NPP, were there from 2004, 2008, lost again in 2008, and are now in opposition. They are predominantly Akan. The leadership caucus is Ashanti and Achim. The previous president was an Ashanti, he was an Akan. the current presidential candidate is Achim. So you can say it's more or less an Akan-dominated party. So there's that. But even within this party, for example, within the party itself, there's a lot of healthy competition, very, very healthy. It's not antagonistic. The competition is fierce, but it's still healthy competition. And I'll explain that in a minute. In the 2008 elections, in the MPP primaries, the sitting president actually anointed Alan Chirmatin, because the president was Ashanti, you see. So he thought, he preferred Alan Chirmatin to be the next presidential candidate. Anyway, so the party went to the primaries, but the president anointed lost. He lost. So Akufo-Addo wins the nomination by 47.9%. I mean, usually, really, if a president, anoints someone and says, this is the one I would like to be my successor, it's quite hard to beat. But he lost, and it had to be accepted. Anyway, so that went on, but they weren't too happy about it. So let's see what happens. They go to the real elections, and in the first round, Akufo-Addo got 49.13%, and Mills got 47.92%. And really, Akufo-Addo needed just 73,000 odd votes to win the first round outright. But look what happened. The NPP strongholds are in the Ashanti and Eastern region. And in these two regions, as many as 319,000 registered voters, I mean, these are registered voters, failed to vote. Even if half of them had voted, their party man would have won the election in the first round. But the Ashantis didn't vote because they were just annoyed that the nomination went to an Achim. Anyway, in the Eastern region, as many as 146,000 registered voters couldn't bother to turn up at the polls. If half of them had voted, their party would have won the election in the first round. So what I'm trying to say is that even within the parties, there is fierce competition. Still, all of that is done in peace. They don't take up arms against each other, that sort of thing. So in the end, once you've lost the first round, the opposition gains ground, and in the end, they were kicked out of government. And as I said, in the end, they were kicked out by just 0.46%. So I've come to the end of my seven main points I wanted to make about why Ghana is the way it is, and how multinationalism, sort of can take place within a single state jurisdiction, yet in peace. And I'm now going to go into some sort of theoretical points, because the main theme of this seminar series for this term, we're talking about nation building in the 21st century. We're talking about reflections on the impact of migration, multinationalism, and multiculturalism. And as I've already been talking about, Ghana, 79% of the country have migrated from the old Ghana Empire. At the moment, it's still multinational, multicultural, and the nation building project is still ongoing. It is still ongoing. They haven't got 99%. It's not as homogeneous as Portugal and England that over time have become one sort of single homogeneous group. So the theoretical points I'm wanting to make really are, the first one is that the art of brewing the nation in multinational pot still remains a conundrum. And by a conundrum, I mean that we all know what the solution is. We all know what the solution should be, but there's still no resolution. We all know that we want one single nation under one government umbrella, or whatever it is. I mean, in all the other examples around the world, that's what they're aiming at. That's what every government is aiming at. So we know what the solution is, yet there is no resolution. That's why it's a conundrum. So the art of brewing the nation in the multinational pot is still a conundrum. No country has perfected the art. There's no blueprint to follow. There are lots of examples around the world. I mean, I started with many examples, but none is a blueprint to the other. Each country has to work out theirs as they go along. And what tends to happen, which is the other theoretical point, is that heterogeneity can assume homogeneity with time. I mean, Portugal has done it, England has done it, and even in England, you England is still part of the UK, and the UK, I mean, there's always talk about devolution, Scotland, Wales, but at least within England, which is a nation itself, I mean, it's a nation because at least we know that England is a separate team in the FIFA World Cup. So it is a nation in its own right. But with time, homogeneity, so heterogeneity can assume homogeneity. And so I'll sort of conclude with a quote, which kind of sums up the scenario in Africa, which is that ethno-national heterogeneity evolves into national homogeneity if the conditions are right. And the vice versa can take place. If the conditions are right, homogeneity can deteriorate. But with time, heterogeneity evolves into homogeneity if the conditions are right, which also means that heterogeneity is not an absolute obstacle to the attainment of a single national identity for any post-colonial state or for any multinational post-colonial state. In other words, heterogeneity does not always prevent homogeneity, or heterogeneity has potential to assume homogeneity if given the chance. So these are the theoretical points which I will sort of conclude with within the theme of the seminar series on, multinationalism and nation building in the 21st century. So I'll sort of leave it at that as food for thought. Sure.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Michael. Thanks for the interesting presentation. I feel like I've learned so much about a country that I thought I already knew a lot about, but obviously there's so much more to learn about Ghana. So thank you very much, Michael. I'd like to now turn it over to questions from the floor. So if anyone has a question, now it's time to ask. Let's go to you at the back, please.
Thanks very much for the talk. That's really very interesting. I work in LSE Health, which is a research centre here focused on health policy. And we've been doing some research and planning some further research in Ghana on the social health insurance, the national social health insurance scheme. And I was wondering, something that really interests me is whether something like developing a national social health insurance scheme, you feel that's part of a nation building project, and whether it kind of partly, well, I think it's basically failed in Ghana at the moment to really take off. And is that a sign of failure at nation building, or do you have anything to say about the connection between, social security, everyone paying a level of contribution that contributes to a national pot that in Europe after the Second World War was able to occur due to the kind of national solidarity that people felt with their fellow citizens after the war. Is that something that we can think about in Africa in a similar kind of way?
Sure. Are you okay?
We'll just take one at a time.
Sure. Yeah, the NHIS or the National Health Insurance Scheme is something which Ghana has been struggling with, as I'm sure you know. It is part of the nation building project. Already, the identity group thing has, I think they've kind of gone past the phase. But now we're talking about really social security. I think really what's happened is because, a pot of money was put down for this scheme to run, but for some reason the disbursement of the funds was not quick enough to go into local health centers to fund the scheme. So it has failed. So it's more really to do with just the government apparatus not getting their act together. The government apparatus not getting their act together, as well as there not being a tradition of citizens contributing to social security, so that when the budget was made, when the decision was made to have a national health insurance scheme, a budget, some pot of money was put there, but it wasn't as if they're going to get it from citizens. So the government began to struggle with the implementation of it. So that is part of the next phase of the nation building project, and they'll have to kind of work hard to get it done. They'll have to work hard to get it done. But as you say, I think one way would be to sort of establish a tradition of social security contributions that will build up towards this sort of thing. One of the reasons this hasn't happened is because of the database. The national taxation database is still being revamped. And I think once that's done, then they're going to be able to know the sources of funding to certain national or social security projects. And that's going to help the national insurance scheme. So it's part of the nation building project. They're kind of working at it, but they are not there yet. Fortunately, the current president is a tax expert. He's a professor of taxation. So actually, in his time, he's actually revamping the whole national tax database. And I think from then, they're going to be able to know how to handle, where the money should come from to go into social security. And it's not going to be health, it will be other things as well. So I don't know whether that helps in any way. Sure.
Is that okay? I'm just going to the gentleman here and the gentleman at the back. And the lady at the front.
Elijah, I'm from Ghana, Kumasi.
All right.
And I'm a student at King's College. I'm doing an MSc in Environment and Development.
Okay.
I don't know if you are aware of the fact that a couple of months ago, chiefs from the Western region walked to the National House of Parliament to demand that 10% of the oil revenue should be invested in the
Right,
the
yeah,
Western
sure.
region. What do you make of that? Do you think it's going to worsen polarization?
For the benefit of the rest, basically, there's the usual talk around the world that if natural resources are coming from a geographical region, then 10% of what's coming, whether the gold or the oil or the diamonds, should be used to develop that geographical area. And the vice president somehow dropped himself into it and made an announcement during the electoral campaigns that, if we win the election, we're going to make sure that 10% of the oil proceeds are used to develop the western region where the oil is going to be dug from. And he'd forgotten he'd made that. So at some point, there was the National Petroleum Bill going through Parliament, and it became clear that the bill as it stood, if it was passed, was not going to fulfill the campaign promise that 10% should go to the Western region. So the people in the Western region, gathered together and marched all the way to the House of Parliament and said, hey, this is what you said, this is what we demand, this is what we want. And he's kind of asking whether that's the way, whether that's going to cause any ethnic polarization. No, it wouldn't cause any ethnic polarization. What it means really is that the government now has to be accountable for what it said it would do. That's what you said you're going to do. That's what's done all around the world. And it makes sense that if you're actually drilling oil from a particular place, that for the sake of corporate social responsibility, you set aside some of the money for the development of that place, because really they're the ones that are going to bear the brunt of some of the repercussions. If the oil spills, they're the ones that are going to face it. Sometimes because of the influx of money that comes around, you get lots of other social vices taking place in the area, burglaries and thefts, prostitution and other things. And there's going to be a lot of competition for schools there as well, because you've got lots of workers coming to live there because of the oil industry. So really, it makes sense for government to set aside some amount of money to develop the area, which is what they are demanding. And it's not going to cost any, I think the rest of the country supports them in that way. So it's not going to cause any ethnic polarization. And I think it's a good idea that they reminded the government that that's what they said. Yeah, sure.
Excellent. Thanks, Michael.
Okay, hi Michael, my name is Marshall, and as you know, I'm from Côte d'Ivoire, and since you mentioned Côte d'Ivoire in your presentation, I'd like to come back to your introduction.
Okay.
You said that in Côte d'Ivoire we have 75% of ACAN.
Okay.
Yes, and my intervention will focus on 3 points. The first one is, I'd like you to comment a little bit on the political strategy that the first president of the Ivory Coast, before when he was from that group, has put in place to be able to rule the country since 1960 up to 1993, nearly 35 to 40 years. Do you think that his strategy was based on ethnicity, and did he have the backing of this 75% of Akan to be able to rule the country in that perspective? The second second point is, in terms of ethnicity, we know that African politics is very much dominated by this kind of concepts. You know, you use group ethnics to be able to rule or to win election and all that. Looking at the big picture, do you think that in the long run, ethnicity will be brought down in order for democracy, to flourish? Like in the case of Ghana, you just mentioned that we're moving towards this kind of situation where ethnicity is not much more the essence of the way people choose to vote. Do you think that ethnicity one day will lead the way to democracy? The third one is, in terms of specifically talking about Ghana, I know that Nkrumah was an academic, he's got a PhD in that. And during the time that Nkrumah was very much in fashion, with regard to his concept and theory, how to fashion Ghana as a nation. I know that there was a big chunk of the Ghanaian population that migrated into America, and they studied a lot, just trying to follow maybe up to Nkrumah. Do you think that the diaspora in Ghana has played a role, a very major role in terms of bringing down the boundaries of ethnicity in order to have the kind of homogeneity of kind of society that we have in Ghana?
Right, let's see if we can sort out Cote d'Ivoire. Houphouët-Boigny, your first president, started very well.
Yeah.
Actually, as I'm sure you know, and some others know, the ethnic Ouattaras, I mean, at the time when the French took over, it was actually until 1947 that the boundaries were finalized between the Upper Volta of Burkina Faso and Cote d'Ivoire. So you've got ethnic Ouattaras who are Burkinabés, who have actually lived in Cote d'Ivoire, from 1637, when the French encountered Ivorians. Houphouët-Boigny, what he did really was that he didn't antagonize any of these groups. What happened really was that the migrant population were needed for the cocoa farms. So they were all basically incorporated.